Let's talk about symmetry in art and in composition. So it goes back to, odd numbers and off center, which is something we talked about before, and also visual weight. All these elements are interconnected. Now, you can use symmetry in your images. It's not going to be as interesting as if you're using it, for example, in portraiture, and I'll tell you in a minute why. But you can use symmetry in your images if you want to, but when you do that, you really need to be very precise. If you look at this image and how it's been designed, you can clearly see that the lighting is perfectly symmetrical, right? So it took some time to, design the lighting to make sure that the framing is dead on symmetrical. I mean, everywhere you look, all the highlights, they're identical, right? But there are some differences in this image. One of them is going to be texture, because texture is not symmetrical on both sides. And two, you got some very subtle differences in the image that, kind of break this symmetry, okay? The very subtle, like this is not symmetrical, for example, because, these are blazed, there's some different smoke here, different smoke here, different smoke here, etc., right? So the image is symmetrical, but not really, because there's always something that breaks the symmetry. If you're going to make it perfectly symmetrical, it also could work, especially for artificial things, but it's not going to be as powerful. So always try to break symmetry, right? Now I only have one image that it's symmetrical, and you can clearly see that I offset it with different type of editing. So this part of the face falls into shadow, whereas this one is, lit, but, that's a symmetrical framing, right? So you can pull this off for two reasons in photography, because one, people faces are not symmetrical. There's always going to be something that breaks the symmetry, which is why human faces are so fascinating, because even though they look symmetrical, they're not. And two, you can create this kind of effects where you simply, fade something into a shadow, or, create some kind of an effect, and it's kind of symmetrical, but not really. With artificial objects, it's a bit more difficult because, they're really symmetrical, especially hard surface. So you do need to, in my opinion, introduce some elements that are going to be breaking that symmetry in some way, like in this example, okay? However, if you look at my ArtStation or my portfolio, you will see that most of my images are offset in a way that, things are, elements are just positioned around the frame and they balance one another. I very rarely use symmetrical composition because I just don't think it's that powerful. I think it's a bit more static. It could be powerful, but it's not as engaging as breaking the symmetry. So to summarize it, you can create symmetry, but I think you should break it with tiny elements. But when you use it, you need to use it with caution, and you need to be very precise, okay? That's another example from my portfolio. There's a Tokyo International Forum, but that's actually a trick, okay? What I've done here, I literally mirrored this image in Photoshop, okay? But, so left and right hand side are not similar, they're identical, okay? It's a mirror image. You can clearly see that by looking at lights, for example, right? It's literally the same thing on the left and right, but I created a, breakage of symmetry with this text in the middle. So you've been led into that text, which is very powerful, extremely powerful triangle composition, right? Of the entire image. But then you have, you break the symmetry with this text. Now, if you look at this image, there's a clear, 70-30 distribution of elements on the bottom and the top. So even though it's symmetrical, it's offset vertically. So it's dynamic vertically. And then you got this break of taste here in the middle by this asymmetrical calligraphy, right? So that's how I would approach symmetry in art.